Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today, we are going to be tackling some pretty big news in the labor movement.
Yeah.
The SEIU rejoining the AFL-CIO.
Huge news.
It is huge news.
Yeah.
You know, ever since they split back in 2005, it's been this like
Big question marks.
fuming, like what ifs, like what would happen,
Right.
what could this mean? And now the what if is reality.
Yeah.
And we are going to be dissecting this press release straight from the AFL-CIO website
Yes.
to kind of figure out what it all means for labor in the United States. So
It's a big deal.
it is a big deal. I mean,
It's like if you think about it in terms of like a sports team,
okay.
like getting their star player back
Yeah.
after all these years apart.
Yeah.
And so the SEIU is bringing almost 2 million members back to the AFL-CIO, creating this powerhouse of almost 15 million workers.
Yeah, so we've got this super team now, but what's their game plan?
Right.
What are they going to do with all this power?
Right. Because power in numbers is definitely the theme here.
Yeah.
You know, having that many people that you can mobilize to advocate for change is a game changer.
Yeah, and the press release mentions a whole bunch of different goals, but one that really jumped out at me when I was reading it was this focus on making it easier for workers to join unions.
Yes.
So why is that such a big deal right now?
Well, I mean, you just think about how much the way we work has changed.
Right.
I mean, you've got this explosion of the gig economy where people are classified as independent contractors, not as employees.
Yeah.
And that makes it much harder for them to organize and, fight for things like a $15 minimum wage or overtime pay.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have all of these state-level right-to-work laws that are specifically designed to weaken unions.
Yeah, it's always sounded kind of backwards to me, Like, shouldn't it be right to organize or something?
Exactly. That's exactly what the AFL-CIO is pushing for.
Okay.
They want to level the playing field by making it easier for workers to form unions, regardless of their industry or employment status.
And they specifically mentioned targeting all levels of government,
yes,
local, state, and federal.
All of them.
So they're not just going after employers, they're also going after lawmakers.
It's a two-pronged approach.
Yeah, it's like a two-pronged attack.
That's a good way to put it. They're pushing for new legislation.
Okay.
To strengthen and expand the right to organize.
Yeah.
But they're also simultaneously holding elected officials accountable.
There's that accountability word again. I mean, it sounds good in theory.
Right.
But how do they actually plan to hold these politicians' feet to the fire?
Well, they have a couple of key tools in their arsenal.
Okay.
Endorsements, for example, can swing elections, especially in really tight races.
Right.
And then there's the whole power of grassroots mobilization.
Okay.
Getting their members and their families out to vote, to phone bank, and to donate to campaigns.
So it's not just about, writing strongly worded letters or something. It's about flexing some serious political muscle.
Exactly. And they're not afraid to call out bad actors either.
Okay.
The press release specifically mentions challenging union-busting corporations.
Right.
And we're seeing this play out in real time right now.
Yeah.
With companies like Starbucks and Amazon facing intense scrutiny for their anti-union tactics.
And it's not just the big-name companies either.
Right.
The press release highlights stories from workers.
Real people.
Yeah, real people, real stories.
Yeah.
Across all these different industries.
All different kinds of jobs.
Yeah. We hear from Naomi Martinez, a Starbucks barista who was fired for organizing.
Right.
Shay Parker, a Waffle House worker who's struggling to make ends meet.
Right. And
they're really painting a picture.
They're really trying to connect with a wider audience.
Of what's at stake for workers.
It's not just about union members anymore.
Yeah.
It's about anyone who has ever felt powerless in their job or frustrated by a system that seems rigged against them.
Okay, so we've got the goals, we've got the strategies, but is this just wishful thinking?
Right.
I mean, can this merger actually move the needle?
Well, one thing that makes me hopeful is the sheer scale of this combined force.
Okay.
Remember, we're talking about almost 15 million workers.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you have the fact that union approval ratings are the highest they've been in decades.
Really?
Especially among young people.
So there's this groundswell of support that wasn't there before.
Absolutely.
Wow.
The press release even mentions that over 60 million workers would join a union if they could.
Wow.
So the potential is definitely there.
Yeah.
The question is, can they capitalize on it?
Okay.
And translate it into concrete gains for workers?
All right, so we've got the potential,
Yeah.
but it's not going to be a cakewalk.
No, it's not.
There are going to be some serious obstacles to overcome.
Definitely.
What are some of the biggest hurdles that they are going to have to face?
Well, I think one of the toughest challenges is going to be navigating this current political climate that we're in.
Right.
I mean, we have a deeply divided Congress, and these labor issues are so often highly partisan.
Yeah.
So even getting like really basic pro-worker legislation passed can be a real uphill battle.
So is it even realistic to expect them to get any, like, major legislative wins in this current environment?
That's a great question.
Or are they putting too much faith in a system that's kind of stacked against them?
Yeah, I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
I think they're going to have to play the long game here. You know, building coalitions and leveraging public pressure to really try to influence lawmakers.
Yeah.
But it's not just about federal legislation either. They also emphasize the importance of state and local organizing as well.
So it's kind of a multi-level strategy.
Yeah.
Going after the big picture stuff, but also working from the ground up at the same time. Yeah.
Like they're pushing for things like card check recognition,
Okay.
which would make it so much easier to form unions in individual workplaces.
Yeah.
And then fighting against things like preemption laws, which can really limit the power of cities and states to enact pro-worker policies.
Okay, so legislation is one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But they also talk about going head-to-head with these union-busting corporations.
Yeah.
So how do you take on a company like Amazon
It's tough.
that has practically unlimited resources?
Yeah, I mean, it's a total David versus Goliath situation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's hopeless.
Okay.
You know, I think public pressure campaigns can be really, really effective.
Uh-huh.
I mean, think about all the boycotts and protests
Right.
that have forced companies to change their labor practices in the past.
Yeah, hitting them where it hurts.
Exactly. Their reputation, their bottom line. And, you know, social media has given workers such a powerful platform now
Oh, yeah.
to expose these unfair labor practices
Yeah.
and to mobilize consumers.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the legal route, too.
Okay.
You know, challenging those anti-union tactics in court can be expensive and time-consuming.
Yeah.
But it can also lead to some really important precedents
Right.
that help to protect workers' rights.
Yeah. And the press release actually mentions a few legal wins
It does.
that the SEIU and the AFL CIO have already secured.
Yeah, they're really proud of those.
Yeah. And they should be. I mean, those wins are crucial
They are.
because they show that it's possible
Yeah, it can be done.
to hold even the most powerful corporations accountable
Right.
and, maybe inspire other workers to stand up for their rights as well.
It can be contagious.
Yeah. I guess seeing someone else win can give you the courage to fight your own battle.
Absolutely.
It's that strength in numbers thing.
It is.
Right.
Right. And that's where I think this merger could really make a difference.
Because by coordinating their efforts and pooling their resources,
Right.
they can mount much more effective campaigns
Okay.
against even the biggest corporate giants out there.
And they specifically call out the need for multi-union organizing.
Yes.
Is that a new tactic?
I mean, it's not entirely new.
Okay.
Historically, unions have sometimes been more competitive with each other than
Really?
collaborative,
Huh.
especially when it comes to organizing in new workplaces.
Okay.
But I think in recent years, there's been this growing recognition that solidarity is really essential.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're all fighting for the same basic things,
Right.
like fair wages, decent benefits, safe working conditions.
Yeah, why not join forces?
Why not join forces, right?
Exactly.
And increase your leverage.
And the press release actually highlights
Okay.
some successful examples of multi-union organizing campaigns.
Okay.
Take the Fight for $15 movement, for example.
That was a nationwide effort involving multiple unions, community organizations, faith groups.
Yeah, and that campaign had a huge impact.
It did.
I mean, minimum wage laws have changed all over the country because of it.
Yeah, it's a great example of what can be accomplished when workers come together and demand change.
Yeah.
And I think with this merger, we could see even more ambitious campaigns like that in the future.
Okay, so we've got the legislation, we've got the corporate battles, we've got the power of collective action. It's starting to feel like they've really got all their bases covered.
Right.
But even with all this strategizing,
Right.
there's still the human element.
Right. There is.
People actually need to want to join unions for any of this to work.
That's such a crucial point.
Yeah.
Because all the strategies and all the tactics in the world aren't going to matter.
Right.
If workers themselves aren't engaged and motivated.
Right. So it's not just about signing people up. It's about getting them fired up.
Yeah.
Making them feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. Creating a sense of shared purpose.
Mm-hmm.
A belief that collective action can make a real difference.
Yeah.
And that's where those personal stories really come in,
Yeah.
By showcasing the struggles and the triumphs of these everyday workers.
Right.
They're trying to tap into that deep human desire for fairness and dignity.
They're saying, look, this is what's at stake.
Yeah.
This is why we need to fight.
Right.
And it seems like it's working. I mean, remember that stat about 60 million people who would join a union if they could?
Right.
That tells me there's a hunger for change out there. A sense that the current system just isn't working for most people.
And that's a sentiment we're seeing reflected in everything, from the growing support for unions to the rise of all these worker-led movements.
Right.
Like the fight for $15. People are fed up.
Yeah.
They're fed up with stagnant wages, rising inequality, a sense that the deck is stacked against them.
So this merger isn't happening in a vacuum.
It's not.
It's tapping into this much larger wave of discontent and a desire for something better.
Absolutely. And that has to be encouraging for the SEIU and the AFL-CIO.
Right. They're like riding this wave.
They are.
Yeah.
But the question is,
what is it?
Can they capitalize on this moment and translate it into lasting change?
Okay. So we've talked about the goals, the strategies, the potential. But how does this all actually impact you, the listener?
Right. I mean, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in all the big picture stuff.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is about people's lives. Whether you're a card-carrying union member or someone who's never even thought about joining a union, this shift in the labor landscape could have ripple effects that touch, your wallet, your workplace, even your community.
So paint me a picture. Let's say this merger does everything that it sets out to do. Strengthens unions. It empowers workers. It pushes for pro-worker policies.
Okay.
What does that look like for me in my day-to-day life?
Okay, so imagine you're a barista at a coffee shop, not a union shop.
Okay.
But suddenly, that unionized cafe down the street wins a big contract.
Okay.
Better wages, health benefits, paid sick leave. What happens next?
I don't know what happens next.
Well, chances are your boss is going to have to step up their game to compete for employees.
Oh, so it's like they have to keep up.
It's like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of situation.
Gotcha.
Even if you're not directly a part of a union, their wins can create this upward pressure on wages and working conditions across the board.
So even if I'm not in a union, a stronger labor movement could mean more money in my pocket, better benefits, a safer workplace.
Exactly.
That's a pretty compelling argument.
It is. And, it's not just me saying this. There's actual research that backs this up. There have been studies that have shown that union density, which is basically the percentage of workers who are in unions, is correlated with higher wages and better benefits for all workers, not just union members.
Interesting.
It's like when unions have a strong voice. Everyone benefits from the bargaining power that they bring to the table.
I get it. But, I'm sure there are folks out there who would say, hey, unions are just about looking out for their own members. They don't care about the rest of us.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I think it's important to remember that unions have historically been a driving force behind a lot of the worker protections that we just take for granted today.
Right.
Think about the 40-hour workweek child labor laws. Workplace safety regulations. These weren't gifts handed down from benevolent employers. These are hard-fought victories won by unions, and their impact extends far beyond just union membership.
Right. It's like that saying...
what do unions do? They raise the floor for everybody.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
And it goes beyond, those bread and butter issues like wages and benefits. Unions have also been at the forefront of movements for social justice.
Oh, yeah.
Fighting for civil rights, gender equality, LGBTQ rights.
Right.
They understand that workers' rights are human rights. And they've been such a powerful voice for positive social change.
So this isn't just about economics.
It's not.
It's about building a more just and equitable society for everyone.
Absolutely.
And that's something that seems to be resonating with young people especially.
Yeah, definitely.
Who are more and more drawn to unions as a way to kind of create a better world.
Right. They see it as a path to change.
Okay, so we talked a lot about the potential upsides.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone is thrilled about this whole union thing.
Of course.
There are some, legitimate concerns out there as well, right?
Absolutely. I mean, some people would argue that unions can stifle innovation, drive up costs, create all sorts of bureaucratic hurdles.
Right.
And, there are valid points on both sides of this debate.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have those conversations honestly and respectfully.
Right. It's not about, demonizing anyone or shutting down debate.
Exactly.
It's about understanding different perspectives and finding common ground where we can.
And at the end of the day, I think the success of this merger is going to depend on their ability.
Okay.
The SEIU and AFL-CIO's ability to build bridges, to create a movement that's inclusive and truly representative of the incredible diversity of the American workforce.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm left with this question: what happens next?
Right.
What can we, the listeners, actually do to shape the future of work?
I love that question.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to feel powerless.
It is.
In the face of these huge systemic issues. But there are things that we can all do.
Okay.
We can educate ourselves about labor issues. We can support pro-worker candidates.
Okay.
We can engage in conversations with our friends and family.
Right.
And most importantly, we can stand up for our own rights in the workplace.
When you lay it out like that,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem so overwhelming.
Right.
It's about taking small steps, using our voices, and believing that collective action can make a difference.
That's the spirit. I mean, the future of labor is ultimately in our hands.
Yeah.
Let's choose to build a world where everyone has the opportunity to work with dignity, earn a fair wage, and live a fulfilling life.
Well said. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.
Yes.
And remember, the conversation doesn't end here.
It doesn't.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a better future for all.